LBC's Election Call.
And a very warm welcome to our final election call of this election campaign. Only, 13 hours to go until the polling stations open. So we're going to spend the next half an hour in the company of the leader of the Green Party, Natalie Bennett. She's here to take your calls. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call, or you can text us on 84850. Natalie, good to see you again.
It's great to be back in your very shining new studio.
It's different from the first time you came in, isn't it?
Definitely.
Now, how bruising has this campaign been for you personally?
Well, it's been very exciting, a great learning curve, and I've very much enjoyed it. It's been a great experience to see the Green Party growing so fast. We've now got 4 times the membership that we had a year ago. See us getting such strong support. I mean, last night I was in Bristol West. Hundreds of people came out for an impromptu rally, all supporting the Green Party, something arranged at 36 hours' notice. That's very exciting, and to meet so many people really enthused by the Green Party campaign.
But from a personal point of view, it has been bruising for you, hasn't it?
Well, any campaign is going to be enormously challenging, but it's been immensely exciting and very enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to tomorrow.
OK, well, let's go to your calls, lbc.co.uk, if you'd like to watch us as well. Let's go to Kelly, who's in Folkestone. Hello, Kelly.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Hello, Natalie.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi. I mean, I'm a recent convert to the Green Party. I was brought up in the Green Surge, I suppose, and I'm going to vote Green Party as of tomorrow. My concern is that during the Green Surge we were looking at figures of around 26% in the polls, and now when you see the polls... I
don't know what poll you were looking at, Kelly.
Well, I do know what poll...
It was a YouGov poll in November 2014.
Yeah, I know the poll that Kelly's referring to, and that was one in which there was a very specific question asked, which was, if you think the Green Party could win, who would you vote for? And that produced a 26%. I think in more regular polls, the highest we ever got was Ashcroft on 11%.
What's your question then, Kelly?
Well, basically, I speak to lots of people, and they say, yeah, they would vote for the Green Party if this happened or if that happened, and what would Natalie say? What does Natalie say to people that have Green Party in their hearts but they're voting tactically, or they're thinking?
So in a sense, you're saying what happened to the Green Party surge, I suppose.
Well, I think what you're saying, Kelly, and I think it's a real challenge for us, and it's a real challenge for us for a message for the next few hours, which is people have been through decades of the first past the post electoral system being told that you've got to hold your nose and vote for a lesser of two evils to stop the people you really hate getting in. And I've got a very simple message that I'd ask you to give to all of those people and, to everybody listening. We've got the kind of politics that we have now, the kind of politics where we've seen a Labour leader, Ed Miliband, on Question Time last week, saying, almost boasting, that he's going to be the first Labour leader ever going into election promising to cut key services. That's what we've got, a tactical voting where you get the Tories offering austerity heavy, Labour offering austerity light. Tactical voting has given us that kind of politics.
Maybe.
If we want a different kind of politics, it's in the hands of voters tomorrow. I mean, there's still at least 15% of undecided voters out there.
But you know that there are a lot of dissatisfied people out there, dissatisfied with the main two parties. UKIP has capitalised on that. And I think Kelly's got a point here. She says, what's happened to the Green Surge? Well, at one point you were outpolling the Liberal Democrats, maybe not a huge record in this election, but you were sort of 8, 9, 10%. You ought to have built on that, but I would suggest to you that it's because of the shambolic campaign that you and your party have run that hasn't happened.
Well, I don't think that's a reflection of what I'm hearing from people, in places like Bristol West, in Norwich South, in Sheffield Central. I think, as we're seeing both UKIP and us, there are people around the country who are feeling that urge, that pressure that comes from decades of experience to vote tactically. But what I'd say to all of them, if you want a different kind of politics, if you want to change the politics that we've got now so that it works for the common good, so that it's done in a different kind of way, vote for what you believe in tomorrow, because that's the way you're going to get real change.
Do you not think that you personally have let down your colleagues in the way that you've conducted this campaign, some of the interviews that you've done?
I was at those times very disappointed, but this has been a long campaign. I've taken part in 2 leader debates, which have gone very well. I've had very good feedback from. This is a whole long campaign. It's a campaign in which the Green Party has taken its place at the centre of British politics. It's a campaign in which we've seen our membership more than quadruple.
Okay.
It's been a successful campaign.
You've certainly managed to quadruple the membership. Absolutely. Sonia is in Solihull. Hello, Sonia.
Hi there, Ian. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Sonia.
I was thinking of voting Green or Labour tomorrow, but then I realised that they both have very discriminatory immigration policies, more discriminatory than UKIP. So I'd like to ask Natalie, why do you favour an immigration policy that would have meant that you wouldn't have had the equal opportunity to come here if you decided to come now?
I assume that, Sonia, that you're referring to the fact that people have free movement within the EU, and that's something that the Green Party celebrates. That's absolutely great. That's something that gives equal opportunities to the people of Britain to have choices to move around the EU as people from the rest of the EU have to move here. That's part of being a member of the EU, and that's absolutely great. And of course, what we want in terms of other immigration is a fair, humane policy for non-EU citizens, which is not what we've got at the moment. It's a very unfair policy in terms of our treatment of refugees. We're not taking our fair share of Syrian refugees.
How many should we be taking?
Well, what we should be doing is looking at the UN has asked us to take our fair share, which would at the start only be a couple of... sorry, if you can let me finish the sentence in, which would be our fair share of the most vulnerable, which would be about 10,000 of the 140,000 of the most vulnerable Syrian refugees. Germany, in the last year, took 30,000 refugees under the same programme. We should be taking our fair share. And also we should be treating fairly Britons who want to live in their own country with a non-EU spouse or partner. At the moment we have rules that a judge described as unfair and unreasonable, whereby if you want to bring a non-EU spouse or partner to Britain, you have to be earning more than £18,600 a year, which excludes about 50% of British people.
Well, I mean, somebody that I've come across in Norfolk, former British champion squash player, who's married an Australian husband. He's not allowed to come into this country. And, I mean, what about Sonia's point about you wouldn't be allowed to come into this country as an Australian?
Well, I think I came into this country because I had a grandparent right. My grandparent was born here. That's a right that exists for, I think, all Commonwealth citizens. So that's, not discriminatory. That applies around the globe. And reflects, I have some Cornish tin miners and some Lancashire locksmiths in my family history.
Don't we all?
Well, but I think, what we need is a fair, humane policy, and that's not what we've got at the moment.
OK, thank you very much, Sonia. Let's go to Hugh in Epsom. Hello, Hugh.
Hello there, how are you?
Fine.
Hi, Hugh.
What's your question?
Natalie, good evening to you. I felt my store. Unfortunately, I won't be voting for Green this time around. I do have a question for you with regard to your intent towards UK defence. You set out your stall with regards to Trident. You're clearly willing to take a gamble with our national security, and you're clearly willing to look at sort of removing or certainly reducing our force structure. What do you plan to do if it goes horribly wrong and you weaken the...
I think he's gone. Natalie. I think you got the gist.
I got the gist of the question. And first of all, to clarify in terms of conventional defence forces, we would plan the same cuts to our size of our forces that the coalition plans now, exactly the same size.
Finally, something you agree with David Cameron over.
Well, I also agree with him on gay marriage, for example, and I'll give him credit for that one as well. So in terms of conventional forces, we're talking about exactly the same cuts as the coalition has planned to 2020. That's exactly the same levels. In terms of Trident, yes, the Green Party has long very passionately believed that Trident nuclear weapons make us less safe. We're coming up in 2016 to a decision point where there will be a choice about whether we replace those nuclear weapons, whether we spend £100 billion on these dangerous weapons of mass destruction that we can never use, or whether we actually choose to make the world a safer place by moving towards getting rid of nuclear weapons in the world. And, of course, what we can also spend some of that money on is making a more secure, safer world, money on aid, money on diplomacy, money on dealing with hunger, disease, and human rights abuses around the world.
You will remember the 1980s when the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament singularly lost the argument because they argued we should give up all of our nuclear weapons and not demand anything in return from the Soviets. And, I mean, most people thought that was a ludicrous policy, but you're effectively adopting that now. You want to give up our independent nuclear deterrent for nothing in return at all. How is that at all logical? Have you not learnt nothing from history?
Well, what we're saying is that we live in a very insecure world, a world with lots of threats to our safety.
Exactly, so that's why we need a deterrent.
And most of those threats, nuclear weapons are no use at all against terrorism. They're no use at all.
What would you say is the main threat to this country at the moment? Would it come from Russia, for example, a country with nuclear weapons? Would we not be safer by retaining our independent nuclear deterrent there?
Well, I think most people would say that the most immediate threat in terms of obviously there's natural disasters, disease, antibiotic resistance, all sorts of those kind of threats. But if you're talking about military type threats, then obviously threats of a terrorist attack are the most immediate threat.
But let's talk about Russia. Do you think Vladimir Putin would actually respect a British Prime Minister who gave up our nuclear deterrent?
I think we would be setting out a place in the world in terms of pushing for supporting the ban on nuclear weapons, which there's a drive for around the world. Now, do you really think the people of Norway, the people of any other country in the world without nuclear weapons is any less safe than we are? I don't believe that's the case at all. We are, by continuing to have, against the provisions of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which says we must be trying to get rid of the world's nuclear weapons. That's a treaty we've signed up to.
There are fewer nuclear weapons in the world now than there have been for many, many years, and that's been achieved through multilateral talks, not unilateral gestures, which may make Green Party members feel good about themselves, but are actually endangering our national security.
No, well, I think what we've seen surveys. There's massive support for this among the public. There's massive support for this among quite a lot of Labour MPs and prospective Labour MPs.
I think you've been looking at the wrong YouGov polls again. Anyway,
there are many different polls on many issues.
Let's move on. Let's go to Martin in Upminster. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Ian. Good afternoon, Natalie.
Good afternoon, Martin.
You were just questioning Natalie's history from a defence perspective. I'd like to question it from an economic perspective, because has Natalie not learned anything from the 13 years of a Labour government overspending and racking up debt, the 5 years where the Conservatives and the Liberals had to save the country? And it's all very well talking about these policies that, spend this, spend that, anti-austerity this, anti-austerity that. But the reality is you've got to balance the books. And Natalie, of all the debates and all the phone-ins that you've taken part in, you've never once explained just how you're going to, A, balance the books, and B, get down the deficit. And I'd like you to answer that, please.
OK, well, Martin, there's two questions in there, and so I'm going to tackle one, the historical one first, and then second, the balancing the books question. First of all, we are in an economic mess. We have a problem with the deficit and the debt because of our fraud-ridden, out-of-control, risk-taking financial sector. It was not excess government spending that got us into this situation. If you look at the graphs of the level of the debt and the deficit, they leap up with the financial crisis. That's where the problem starts. That's what caused the problem. So it's not government spending that caused the problem. What we've seen since under this government is austerity that's actually put us in a far worse situation than we would have been had we continued with a reasonable level of government spending. And you can see this if you look at the practical points of this. You think about the children's centre or the library that's almost certainly closed near you. There were staff in that children's centre, say, who were paying national insurance, paying tax, had enough money in their pocket to spend modestly, decently in your local community, in your local shops. That got closed down. You lost an essential service in your local community. That person, that worker, is now on job seekers allowance.
But the point is, you talk about austerity. How can it be austerity when we're still borrowing £90 billion a year? It's austerity when that doesn't seem to me to be what the normal definition, normal economic definition of austerity actually is. But you want to increase the amount of debt. And you want to increase the deficit. How does that stack up economically?
Well, first of all, to clarify, yes, we do want to increase the debt. We want to borrow more money. We want to, by the end of this Parliament, in the fully costed manifesto in which all the details, the tables are all set out in the back of our manifesto, by the end of the Parliament, we have a deficit that's 1% of GDP. It's 5% of GDP at the moment. So we're significantly reducing the deficit. but we are spending on the essential things that we need. And what austerity has meant is cut back essential services,
your
things we actually need.
adds £180 billion of public spending.
And what we're doing by the
So
end.
how can you possibly say that you're going to reduce the deficit?
Well, what we're doing is we're raising money by making multinational companies and rich individuals pay their way in taxes, which they're simply not doing at the moment. We have a situation where we have soaring in economic inequality. The 1% of the richest are getting richer. We've just had the Sunday Times
And paying
rich
30%
list,
of the tax.
rich list out, but they're not paying their fair share.
No, they're paying. Hang on a minute. How much would you like them to pay? They're already paying 30% of income tax.
Well, what I'd like to do is see each one of those individuals, because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about them as a group. We're talking about individuals paying their fair share of tax, and also dealing with the economic inequality that the IMF and the World Bank say that economic inequality, the soaring inequality, is a threat to our future economic stability. We cannot continue to have a society where so many people are struggling to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head.
Do you think, Abraham Lincoln once said, you don't make the poor richer by making the rich poorer, and I think there's quite a lot in that, and yet you want to do what Dennis Healey used to say in the 1970s, squeeze the rich until the pips squeak. What marginal tax rates would you like to see the rich paying?
No, what I want to see is the rich paying their fair share to get
you've said that before.
To get a better society. And they will, we're talking about things like the wealth tax, in which we want to see a 2% tax each year on people worth more than £3 million.
A 2% of their entire wealth every year?
Yep.
And you'd like an income tax rate of, 75% like they have in France?
No, our top rate of income tax is 60p on the pound on earnings over £150,000. And what this is actually, certainly in terms of the wealth tax, people are paying to get a better society. Rich people rely on policing, rely on our roads,
look at what's happened in
rely on
France,
public
where
services.
France has adopted policies not dissimilar to yours, and unemployment is soaring in France. There is a lot more austerity in France than there's ever been in this country, and yet you want to follow what the French government have done on public spending and indeed on taxation.
Well, I think if you look at the French situation, there's lots of issues that are different about the French economy to the British economy. So drawing that parallel, it's more complicated than that.
Okay,
simply.
of course there are differences with different countries, but you can see that some of the parallels. I want to move on because we've only got 7 or 8 minutes to go. You can watch us, of course, at lbc.co.uk as well as listen. Lawrence is in Wandsworth. Hello, Lawrence.
Oh, good evening, Ian. Good evening, Natalie.
Good evening.
What I'm worried about is there's a threat from ISIS, trying to get into Europe. They really want to get into Europe to cause havoc, cause death to people. Do you not believe in sheep's clothing?
I'm guessing that what you're referring to is refugees coming across the Mediterranean. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have vulnerable women, children and men who are fleeing war, desperate, vicious civil war, who are fleeing political repression, who are refugees to whom we have a moral responsibility, a legal responsibility under UN treaties. And Britain has a very proud history of being a place of refuge for people fleeing such persecution, fleeing such desperate circumstances. And I would really ask you, Lawrence, whether you want to abandon that principle, that moral place in the world. Do you think that's something we should just give up?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the fact is that ISIS they've categorically stated that they would love to get into Europe. We have got to do something to make sure that these people do not get into Europe.
Well, one addition to that, of course, is that you made some comments in an interview earlier in the election campaign where you said you thought it was perfectly okay. I think I'm not misquoting you, that you wouldn't want to stop British people joining ISIS if that was a decision that they made.
Well, I think that wasn't what I said.
To be clarify what you did say, because that was how it was reported.
Okay, well, to be very clear, any sort of membership or support for ISIS in any way, this is a vicious, hideous criminal organisation responsible for violence and death around the world. Any support for it should be pursued to the fullest extent of the law.
Well, Green Party policy states it should not be a crime simply to belong to an organisation or have sympathy with its aims, though it should be a crime to aid and abet criminal acts or deliberately fund such acts. So you're actually happy for people to join ISIS as long as they don't actually do anything bad?
Well, obviously joining would involve some level of support, and therefore you'd be supporting their actions, and that would be criminal.
It should not be a crime simply to belong to an organisation. Why not? Surely it should be a crime to belong to a terror organisation like ISIS, because if you join them, you're giving them support, you're effectively probably giving them financial support as well. Why shouldn't that be a crime?
Well, what we're referring to here is this is a piece of Green Party policy that actually dates back to the era of Nelson Mandela and the ANC. So it's a question of which organisation you're talking about, and there's no question about ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
So you think it should be a crime to belong to ISIS or Al-Qaeda?
Exactly.
OK, well, I'm glad we've cleared that up. Let's go to James in Greenwich. Hello, James.
Oh, hi, Ian, and hello, Natalie.
Hi, James.
Good to hear you feeling better and back to your old self. I want to have a quick question about housing. I promise it's not a trick question. I realise you.
That's all right. I've got those numbers engraved on my brain, James. Don't worry.
Well, don't worry. I've been in the sort of sector for many years, and whilst I applaud you for the target of 500,000 affordable, and by that I mean social housing targets, you will know as well as I, and experts you will have talked to, that will not build us out of this crisis, which is now becoming
OK, James, we're nearing the end. I need your question.
Well, basically, what are the urgent short-term measures we need, not just building targets? They will not build us out of this immediate crisis.
So what are the short-term measures to fix the housing crisis?
Well, 700,000 empty homes. We want to bring at least half of those back into use. What we need also is very much a regional rebalancing of our economy, building up the economy in the North and the Midlands. That's where a lot of those empty homes are. That's where places where people are being forced out by economic reasons, forced down into the South and South East, into London. We need to rebalance our economy. We need to actually stop putting so much pressure, restrain the private rental market, rebalance. So we think about housing as being not a financial asset primarily, but as an affordable, safe, stable place for people to live.
Russell Brand has been in the news a lot in recent weeks. Did you feel left out when he endorsed Caroline Lucas and not you?
No, I entirely understand why lots of celebrities, may feel like they want to tie themselves to one particular person, and indeed, the person he's been the absolutely brilliant MP for Brighton Pavilion over the past period of the Parliament. I entirely understand that.
But did you not do a joint interview with him, with Caroline?
Yeah, we did.
So,
I did.
So she presumably impressed him, and you didn't. Is that what happened?
Well, I think what's happening is lots of people have naturally been endorsing Caroline to return Caroline to Parliament as the Brighton Pavilion MP. The polls are looking good. We've still got a big drive on there, and I'm urging everyone in Brighton Pavilion and around the country to vote Green.
What's your definition of success?
I think this is the most unpredictable election since the Second World War. We're going to see what happens, but my simple message to everybody out there is vote for what you believe in. Tomorrow. Vote Green.
My question really is: is success getting one extra MP, two extra MPs, or just getting Caroline Lucas re-elected?
Well, I think the thing is what we've got around the country is more than 600 individual election races. Each one of those can actually come down to a handful of votes, and that's utterly unpredictable. It's in the hands of the voters tomorrow, which is why I would urge every single person, however they're going to vote, to go out and vote tomorrow.
No, we can all agree on that. But if you don't get any extra MPs, or if Caroline Lucas doesn't retain her seat and you have no MPs, can we expect a Natalie Bennett resignation as leader of the Green Party on Friday morning?
Absolutely not. I was elected unopposed as Green Party leader about 9 months ago to serve a 2-year term. I'll be serving that 2-year term.
So no matter what happens, Natalie Bennett is going to carry on.
Exactly.
Natalie, thank you very much indeed. And thanks for being a good sport in all the interviews that you've done with us over the years on LBC. We very much appreciate it.